Herve Larren is the co-founder of a global crypto venture, and he's a reference when it comes to crypto with multiple panels in more than 10 countries. I met Herve actually in the YPO HBS program 7 years ago, and he gave us a session on crypto. It was the first time I heard about crypto, first time I heard about blockchain, and since then we've been calling him Mr. Crypto. And since then he've been telling us just invest in crypto, and now every time we see him, he's always like, I told you so. So now he's Mr. I told you so. And the fact that Herve got so excited about Metaverse and NFT since last year got me interested in understanding more about this space. So Herve, first, thank you for joining this panel. I'm very happy to have you here. Can you just first define what is Web 3.0? Everybody is saying that we're moving from Web 2.0 to Web 3.0 before we dive into the Metaverse and NFT.
Thank you so much, Christine, and my forum mate at Harvard. And I think I only became a reference because 6 years ago, I came with a mining company at the Harvard program and presenting to you guys and says, you know, we can mine a Bitcoin at $400. And at the time, the room was empty. And now it's great to see that we have hundreds of people on calls like this one. I guess it.
You see, he's still saying, I told you so, you know, many years after on a panel in front of all YPOs. Okay. Now this is why you're on stage to tell us about the Metaverse now.
I told you so moment was in 2019 when I wrote the 13 reasons why to buy into Bitcoin when it was at $3,000. But let's talk about the Metaverse. I think one of the concepts, and I spend a lot of time thinking about this, is about the concept of narratives. So, you know, the reason I got into this space is because it solved a problem that I had. My mother is Venezuelan and I needed to send money to Venezuela. And when doing research about money, I realized there's 193 currencies in the world and the bottom 50 collapsed. So how do you actually transfer value from a country that doesn't have a banking system? And I realized that the problem that I couldn't find a solutions, when I fixed the problems with in 10 minutes by sending Bitcoin over there. And I realized that back then Bitcoin was at $70, that if it solved my problem, who's, you know, comfortably in Manhattan, it's going to solve the problems of, you know, millions of potential other people. So then it became risk return ratio. Is that problem going to continue? So I'm half French, half Venezuelan, and both currencies on each side collapsed, the French francs and the Bolivar. So I believe that inflations back in the days was going to be a problem that is going to affect more and more countries. I mean, you know, we know that the levels of debts that we have, we're not going to pay it back. So sooner or later, we're going to have fundamental issues. So when I think about that store of value element, which I think now it's becoming an institutional play, I now think about what is actually going to change. So in 2018, when I came, the first time that I came under the concept of Metaverse, which, by the way, the concept of Metaverse was a book called Snow Crash from Neil Stephenson that was published in 1992. So this is not a new concept, but the first decentralized Metaverse that took scale arrived in 2017. And I remembered, you know, hear about that concept and thought, well, that is probably going to be, you know, the next narrative within the space. Obviously, you know, not knowing what's going to be the roadmap through it, you know, the NFT, you know, Beeple auction was one of the big catalysts for that the industry, the NFT.
And you did bid $1 million on this.
I did. That was the largest bid back in the day for an NFT. Yeah. And I was for 15 seconds, you know, the highest bidder in the world. And, you know, a few hours after, when I was outbid at 69 million, I became the cheapest guy in the world. So that narrative of NFT came around, and afterwards, obviously, when Facebook changed its names, then it gave, you know, the credibility in a worldwide basis. So. When it relates to the Metaverse itself, and this year is really the first year where, you know, so I co-own the largest district in the largest Metaverse. And we have 5 casinos in there. So we have, you know, big companies. We have a festival land. So it's a pretty big, sizable piece of land. It's about 1/10 of the size of Washington, D.C. So when we create this, I realized that now, for the first time, we have companies that now can be onboarded on it, that have a real case scenario. Before, we were kind of topic, Goal 2.0, et cetera, which was great. But now I actually have real conversations with, real businesses who says, hey, how do I actually play the metaverse? Should I buy land? Should I lease land? How should I do it? Who should I contact? How is the neighborhood going to be like? What is the best neighborhood? What is being across two streets more valuable than, in front of a district? So it's a little bit like being the mayor of a city and at the same time the real estate developers, where you want to make everybody happy and you want to build an ecosystem. So now this year, I'm really thinking, how do we actually transition from that concept, from that narrative to actually a real city? How do we manage things? How if there's a conflict between two people in the metaverse? Yesterday I had a very interesting conversations about, what if an avatar bullies another avatar? Should there be any repercussion against that? So this metaverse narrative, from a business standpoint and at the same time from a life standpoint, when virtual reality is going to kick in. So we're still a few years away. When you look at the decentralized metaverse, it looks like a video game of 1985. But what I see in this is the economics behind it. And when the economics work, there's value. So for example, one of the casinos that's on our metaverse launch a series of NFTs. And I'm like, gosh, there's kind of a saturation of the market. What kind of value you're going to bring? And he says, well, it's going to be very simple. People is going to wear a piece of our t-shirt, our NFT t-shirt, and that's the only way to get inside of the casino. And if somebody buys it, and let's say you buy it and you give it to your neighbor who doesn't have the money to put 1 Ethereum for a t-shirt, well, he goes play all night and you get 30% of the revenue that he's making in the casino. So you have people who actually quit their job to actually have real jobs on the metaverse and actually make real money. So that I would say is on the metaverse
side. There's the full business model that is being, can you just explain, if you can take just a step back, what does it really mean I'm building a casino on the metaverse? Like you're taking a piece of virtual land somewhere and you have gamers or programmers that are actually building, like in a video game, a specific building, and then you could rent. Let's say if you're doing a mall, you could lease a mall to other people, like in the real world, but on a virtual platform.
It's exactly like the real world. Often I tell people to forget about the word metaverse and think about it in the real world. You have value of lands that you can flip the land, but generally the value is based on the location, but it's also based on what you build on top of it. It's, if you build something, but on the same time, what you build has a revenue models, well, it'd be traded at a higher multiple. You can actually decide not to buy a piece of land and to actually lease the land itself, and you lock in the price for the next 10 years. So the mindset is exactly the same thing, is exactly the same. And at the same time, the difference is that in the real world, when you buy a piece of retail, well, you'll probably have a few hundreds of thousands of people going in front of your house or your store. Here you can have potentially hundreds of thousands of people passing in front. So it's just a scale issue between both of them. And the same way that, in the early 2000s, we were looking at website and says, well, maybe I should have an e-commerce presence. Now it's about, should I have a metaverse presence? Should I physically be there? Not for what it is right now, but for what it can be in the future. Which leads me to my second point, which is one of the big topics that I think about as one of the narratives in the future. It's about privacy. One of the biggest issues that we have is security. That's the problem with the internet right now. The internet has been built poorly. It has been built in a very hackable way. Not a week passes by before a big company, forget about small companies, before a big company actually gets hacked and you have, credit card leaks all over the place, or private informations of individuals all over the place. Or you have also the situations where it is not private. So the security and the privacy is a big issue. The value of the blockchains is actually to make it decentralized, therefore more reliable, more secure, but there's a privacy element that is missing. In other words, if I have your Ethereum address right now, I can actually see every transactions that you have been making, since you got that. I can see how much money you have right now if I have your Ethereum address. I don't think that in the banking sector, if I say, hey, if you give me your credit card information, I know exactly what your credit score is and how much money you have, everybody will be up in arms. So one of the companies that I advise is the leader in terms of privacy platform for blockchains itself. They're EVM compatible, but at the same time, we add that layer. And I believe that adding that layer is going to be it's not going to be a feature, it's going to be part of the thinking of how we're doing. But right now, the rush is about building on Ethereum itself and not thinking about the privacy layer. So some of the companies that I'm helping at the moment is, for example, the #1 esport company in the country, in the US, who's actually going public at $1 billion SPAC. And they had a very specific issue. They says, we have 350 million followers, but we can't monetize it. If we're monetizing using a centralized unit, all the money is being made by the centralized unit. It's a little bit to say, if you get the product for free, that means you're the product. So what we're saying by building a blockchain as part of the business model is to take the play to earn business model, which is when people actually play, they actually make money, and there's different ways to do that. And that goes a little bit with your gaming talk, or being able to make transactions and share between each other. So I believe that companies in Web 2.0 who has a very wide customer base, fan base, or network have the possibility to reproduce this on a Web 3.0 environment and drastically increase their revenue. I was talking to a NASDAQ company, and they were saying, well, if we implemented what you say should be implemented, we believe that the market cap is going to grow between $2 and $4 billion. So I believe that these are tools to not only scale, but it goes from a world of centralizations where it was sharing information to a world of Web 3.0 where you're actually going to share value. And if we think the internet was a big movement just based on sending emails and Google searches, imagines when you're actually going to be able to trade the pieces of companies, trade the pieces of real estate, and obviously trade the pieces of gold like Bitcoin.
Wow. Really, it's. I'm sure we only have 10 minutes left, and I still have thousands of questions to you. But for everyone on the call, we're gonna be doing on the 21st of Feb. We're doing a session only on the metaverse. But if you can just give us some, because this is the questions that are coming the most. What does it mean I'm buying a piece of land? So I know from you that there is Decentraland, which is one of the metaverse. Facebook doesn't own the metaverse. It's helping to build the metaverse. So there are multiple metaverse that are available. What does it mean that whose door do you knock to go and buy a piece of land and start building things on the metaverse?
Yeah. Well, like in the real world, knowing the door to knock can be a little bit complicated when it reaches to building. There's a lot of behind the scenes. But so you were taking the example of Decentraland. Decentraland is basically 90,000 pieces of land. You can't create one more the same way that you can't create another Bitcoin once you reach
blockchain. Yeah.
Each pieces of land is 16 meters by 16 meters. And then when you arrive, you actually have 3 types of NFTs. The first NFT is actually your name. So the same value that if you have your @first name on Instagram, it has a value. People would say, oh my God, that's kind of prestigious, or having a single-digit plate in Dubai for your license, like that could be considered a
everybody can understand that. Yeah.
A topical example. And also, so that's the first tip, is your name, your identity online, which you can actually register as an NFT. The second one was, pieces of art, pieces of clothes. The clothing industry is actually a huge industry when it relates to the metaverse itself. But when I looked at the number itself, I said, Bitcoin is disrupting the $10 trillion gold industry, the gold market cap. Here, the largest store of value in the world, it's not art, it's not gold, it's actually real estate. The real estate is over $4 trillion market cap. It's 40 times the size of gold. And, when people are going to look at places to actually invest, and when the mindset is actually the same as traditional real estate, they are going to buy pieces of land. Now, you can buy pieces of land on it. And so you basically select the pieces of land. Everything is transparent. You buy it directly with the owner. You don't have to have, a notary or a broker, etc. You can buy it, whatever is available.
So it's this decentralization again, but also the pieces of land could have different prices depending on their location. If there's a mall in front of them, it's like in the real world.
Like in the real world, or, just the owner doesn't want to sell, and want to sell at a certain price. Or, the real value also is not the value of one piece of land, is the value of what we call an estate. That means if you have, for example, 10 pieces of land, it's not 10 times the amount, it's 20 times the amount, because that's the hard part. This is like owning a block. Generally, when you own a block, it's worth more than you own a little house in the middle of other ones. So, and then after that, you can decide what you're going to do with it. Are you going to, run a casino? Are you going to have, are you going to run, movie nights? Are you going to, do a video game on it? So there's like the operational element. So a lot of brands, for example, are saying, well, my core business is actually to sell clothing. I mean, it's like in the real world. I mean, if you're Louis Vuitton, you're not going to buy every single stores where you have every single location where you have a store. You're going to lease it for 10 years, and your core business is actually, selling,
to buy the stores, or the bags,
selling the items. Or there's also the elements where, there's a few celebrities that have virtual pieces of land. People want to be around those areas, so that has a premium. Is it justified or not justified? Well, like in the real world, some people like to be neighbors with certain other people and be part of the community. So there's also the fact that there's a nightclub sometimes, around the corner. Some people might like that, some people might not. So exactly the same mindset. The only difference that I see is the scale of it, is that you potentially can be, you can have a city in China having, hundreds of thousands of people that think that, hey, we want to hang out with that person over there. And we're going to be, all logging in and do this. And, when you look at like centralized games like Fortnite, et cetera, where you have 40 million kids, every Saturday night, going online, these are centralized entities. So in other words, Fortnite makes the money of the 40 million people. If one of these kids says, hey, all 40 million of us, we can create our own game, we can give a little bit of cryptocurrency and it will belong to us. And, eventually we'll have, more and more friends coming over. Then the value that you create is the value that comes to yourself. If you build on a centralized metaverse like Facebook, or others, that's a publicly traded company that's focused on their revenues. And they're putting $10 billion every year, and they're going to expect a return. In this case, the money you're going to own it. Therefore, the upside in the future is going to be coming in your pocket. And that's why it's very hard to go against a decentralized business models where you really have an ownership on the token itself.
So Decentraland is decentralized, so it's owned by whoever owns the plot of lands. So it's not owned by a company.
Yeah, it's not owned by anyone. It's owned by you. So once you have your piece of land, you're gonna own it for forever, and you can give it to your kids afterwards. And yeah, there's nobody can take it over for you.
So from one side you have scarcity because there's a certain number of plot of land you cannot increase it. From the other side you have scale because you reach anyone in the world.
Sorry, I didn't hear the second part. There is scale because
you could reach anyone in the world.
Right, exactly. So it's all based on network effect. Right now it's the number one, the largest decentralized metaverse. So, there's going to be a moment, it's like a little bit like, once you have WhatsApp, you don't need a second WhatsApp. It's like, Facebook is worth, $1.5 trillion. The number two is worth, 25 million. So there is that element where the network is going to be, is actually, it's going to be like where people are going to be hanging out. And ultimately, now there's different variances where you can build something. And in decentralized, for example, even if decentralized fails, you still own your plot of land and you still have, your ecosystem. So it doesn't really matter the overall, metaverse, if it exists or not. It's not going to be like the centralized units where if it shuts down, we completely shut down the operations. That is not going to happen.
Okay. We still have 3 minutes to go. Again, we'll have another session on the metaverse, one on NFT, one on gaming. And I'm just going to read some of the questions. For example, Rahul is asking that, let's say you start with Decentraland, you're paying to get a piece of land, and then someone else opens something else. How can you hedge against this destruction in value if you have another metaverse that is opening next door?
Yeah, I mean, it's like, if somebody can create the next Amazon, like the world is open, and people can create whatever they feel like. I think what the difference is that you actually need to build a community and have a network. So you're already starting with, if you want to build your own metaverse, and by the way, for 12 years, maybe a little less, everybody has been saying, well, I'm going to build the next Bitcoin, a better Bitcoin, more efficient. It went from JP Morgan coin to, every VC in the world, to every entrepreneur. They says, oh, it's going to be better. And ultimately, Bitcoin succeeded. So I do believe that it's going to be, we see the growth, we see the network effect, we see the tokenomics. And the value of this, if somebody builds this, they're going to want to create to continue having the ownership of it. And the key about it, like the founders, so people are saying, well, I know the founders of Decentraland. I'm like, great, that's amazing. But the founders of Decentraland don't own Decentraland.
That own Decentraland.
It's like saying, I know Satoshi Nakamoto. Is like, great, but there's no impact in Bitcoin, to actually know who the person is. So the Decentraland is actually a foundation, and they hold the IP. But at the end, the land is the ownerships of the individuals itself.